Hi, I'm Keenan Casey for tutsplus.com. In this lesson of Machine Learning Distilled, we're going to be looking at the self-organizing map. The self-organizing map is an unsupervised neural network. It allows us to detect features within a large dimensional space, and it does so using a competitive learning technique. After we explain the self-organizing maps, we'll discuss options for neighborhood and learning rates, different versions of the self-organizing map. Essentially, a self-organizing map transforms a high-dimensional space into a low-dimensional space so that it's easier to visualize very complex data. The goal of a self-organizing map is to transform the incoming signal pattern of some arbitrarily large dimension into a one- or two-dimensional map that can be visualized. This transformation is done in a way that preserves the topology of the original space. These are the terms that we'll be using in this lesson. Again, we'll have our input instances x, a vector of n dimensions. That means there are n features. We'll also get to choose a number of output nodes, and this is going to be the resolution of the map that we create. We'll also need to define a neighborhood function, and this is a function, looks like a distance function, that computes the similarity between two instances. Lastly, we'll have a weight vector where there are the same number of weights per output neurons. Let's consider the architecture of a self-organizing map. It has two layers, an input layer, as shown on the right, and an output layer. There's no middle hidden layer like there was in the feed-forward neural network. The topology of the output layer is defined by a dimension, which will be either one-dimensional or two-dimensional. In this case, it's a 2D grid. We have a lattice structure. This could be a rectangular lattice, as shown here, or it could be a hexagonal structure. We also get to define the size of the output topology, which is the width and the height. The self-organizing map is fully connected. That means every input layer neuron is connected to every output layer. And along all these lines, we have one weight per output neuron. All these weights are initially random. The primary thing that we have to do with the self-organizing map is train it. That is, create it so that we can see this mapping from high D space to low D space. First, we will initialize the weights to small random values. Remember that we have one weight per output layer neuron. Secondly, we'll select a training instance x sub I from our data set. In this case, there are 3 dimensions in the input instances. We will compute the distance squared from every x sub I to every weight w sub j. Having computed all those distances, we will find the output node j star that is the closest in distance to this input instance. We call that the best matching unit. In this case, it's w sub 11. For that output node, we will update its weight, the weight of j star, and its neighbors according to this formula. In this case, we're taking all of the one-hop neighbors of w11, and each of these gets its value modified based on current value, the learning rate, and the distance between the training instance and its current value. Now you can see that each of these weights is in bold, signifying that they've been updated. Step 6, we simply repeat this process for the next training instance until we're done. We'll keep doing this iterative process until the output layer doesn't change very much. Let's talk some more about that learning rate. The learning rate is a value that controls how much we update. You can see that the learning rate is a value between 0 and 1, and typically this is going to decrease over time. So at the beginning of the training process, we move a lot, we learn very quickly, and over time we move much more slowly. Another way of saying this is that the learning rate at time t plus 1 is less than the learning rate at time t. If we were going to write this more precisely, we might say that the weight at t plus 1 is equal to the weight at time t plus our learning rate, which is a function of t, times the distance between x sub I and this current weight. How do we define the neighborhood? In our previous example, we looked at just the one nearest neighbor. We could certainly use k nearest neighbor to make this more general and use the 3 nearest neighbors or the 2 nearest neighbors. Another option, if we want to be less discrete and more continuous, is to use a neighborhood strength, which is a 2D Gaussian function, and the result of this neighborhood strength determines how much of an update we get. Lastly, it's also possible that this neighborhood is time dependent, such that over time our neighborhood gets smaller and smaller. That would mean that k decreases, or the sigma value for our Gaussian function decreases, so it gets more and more specific. Let's take a look at a visual overview of how the self-organizing map training process works. In this case, the blue area is the training data, And the small white dot is the current training sample that's drawn from this blue space. Initially, the self-organizing map is just random. What we'll do is choose the point within our map that's closest to this instance. We'll then pull that data point toward this instance. After many iterations, we'll see that our self-organizing map is wrapped around our data space based on the training instances in a way that's very similar to the way that the data instances represent that space. So this example shows us how the self-organizing map can be visualized as a way of pulling this grid onto a high-dimensional space. Let's take a look at an example that's a little bit more tangible. This is taken from the color space. Colors on computers are composed of red, green, and blue combinations. So the RGB space looks something like this cube. How can we represent this 3D space in a two-dimensional way? Let's take some sample values from this, as shown in this table. So this is the amount of red, green, and blue as a value between 0 and 255 for some of the main colors. If we put these values into a self-organizing map, how will it collapse a 2D grid around this three-dimensional space as defined in this table? So given these representatives from the 3D space, can we transform this 3D space into a 2D space? What we'll do is simply pass these red, green, and blue values through our self-organizing map. The result of this process will be a picture somewhat like this. What we've done is create a two-dimensional representation of a 3D space, and you can see how these different colors have remained near each other. You can see how the blues are near each other. So this image on the right shows us the result of running a self-organizing map on these color samples from the 3D space. Now every time we run the self-organizing map, we'll get a different output. These are two examples here. What we see is, though the self-organizing map is not always perfect, this randomness can result in some strange artifacts. For example, it's often possible that a self-organizing map will divide a cluster. In this case, the fuchsia cluster is over here on the right, but also on the left. This property of dividing clusters is one of the downsides to self-organizing maps. So what's the point of the self-organizing map? It's to map a high dimension to a low dimension to give us a visualizable interpretation of some data space. We can find structural similarities by squashing the data down to 2 dimensions. This reduction of complexity allows us to identify relationships within the input data. What are the strengths and weaknesses of the self-organizing map? Well, first of all, it's a very simple algorithm, and it gives us a visualization that is interpretable. It allows us, with our human intelligence, to detect relationships that would be very difficult to see in high dimensions. The weaknesses here are we have to have a really large amount of data in order for this to work well, and sometimes this just isn't possible. It's difficult to acquire all the data, so the usefulness of the self-organizing map is also reduced. Secondly, as we've already mentioned, the divided clusters are a possible result. This is an unnatural clustering of the data. And thirdly, there's a very significant computational overhead. Since we have to compute the distance between the input values and the weights over and over and over again, we are going to have to spend a lot of compute time to achieve that. In this lesson, we've considered the self-organizing map, which is a type of clustering. It's an unsupervised method based on neural networks. I'm Keenan Casey for TUTS Plus. Thank you for watching.